Welcome to the Sensitive Shift podcast. We're your hosts, Agathe and Anna. We're highly sensitive and entrepreneurial. We're nurturers and leaders. In our previous episodes, we explored the complex world of building, fostering, and maintaining relationships as HSPs. We learned about the common challenges that HSP might face recurrently in forming connections, as well as using their foundational empathy feature to establish supportive boundaries and practice self-compassion.
You'll remember from previous episodes that sensitivity exists on a spectrum and that the personality trait of being highly sensitive includes nervous system activation from sensory, emotional, physical, social, and psychological stimulation, in addition to a depth of processing and high levels of empathy. This trait exists in interaction with other personality traits and one's identity markers, backgrounds, desires, and needs. Today's episode is another two-parter where we will dive into an important sphere of most adults' lives, and that is the topic of work. However, the questions we wanted to examine were around the correlation between high sensitivity and career choices, the role that our sensitivity plays in our daily professional activities, and emotions and stimulation at work. We will explore these in our first part, while in the second part of this episode, we'll take a closer look at high performance and high sensitivity. We'll look at questions like, do HSPs make for good leaders? What about entrepreneurship, self-employment, and building and maintaining a business? As always, each of these topics could probably be the subject of an entire season, so we simply hope to start a conversation, pique your curiosity, and without further ado, let's jump in.
Alrighty. To begin with, as we always do for each of these episodes, I was doing a lot of research and reading the different books that I had, the chapters on work and HSPs. And what was reiterated multiple times was this notion of purpose and meaning when it comes to HSPs and career or work, both in what motivates HSPs in their daily tasks, but also in their career choices. So we can often speak about vocational work, and that would mean engaging in work that feels right and that calls you, not necessarily what is easy, fun, or lucrative at a given moment. And I thought that that was particularly interesting as a topic to explore in a time where our current world is very connected and our priorities have shifted towards a more productive, individualistic, and capitalistic society with specific ideas of success. You know, we've talked about this a little bit in other conversations we've had around status, money, security, and then we have also the harsh realities of the world. There's a bit notion of privilege also that comes with choosing our career, choosing the work that we like. And so it can become increasingly difficult and confusing for HSPs to listen to that inner voice about, in quote, following your bliss or vocation, as researchers have called it. And that is coming from most of the work that Elaine Aron has done as well. So it takes time and work and experience and a willingness for self-awareness also, and self-knowing, and of course a lot of courage and bravery, and like we mentioned, a component of privilege and ability to be able to follow our own voice and distance the voices that surround us to truly connect with what is meaningful to us, both professionally and personally.
That makes so much sense as you're speaking. And I'm realizing that I don't know how our listeners are feeling, but that definitely applies to me. And I know that because at a certain point, so I've chosen my career as a dietitian for exactly that reason, what I love, what's meaningful, what I literally look forward to Mondays for. And at a certain point during COVID, actually, I lost my job and then worked in a different field, but it provided a more financial stability. It provided some things were positive in some ways. And also, it was so hard.
Mm,
And I went back to what I love. So I'm very happy to say that. And I'm listening to you and thinking, oh, yeah, that's true for me.
yeah. Well, I love that you can relate even just to that bit in that way. And some of what you said around, having the stability and the steady paycheck didn't feel like that was enough for you to feel fully aligned, to feel like you were living your purpose and the meaning of what you're here to do. And there's a bit more that I want to say on that research that maybe will answer some of that questioning. So, in the beginning, we talked about is there a correlation between HSPs and career choices? So, let's talk a bit about that. Maybe the natural trends that HSPs tend to gravitate towards. So, I think back to your description of the advisor versus warrior roles, Anna, that you talked about in other episodes that I think will come back quite a bit in this one because it is quite relevant to this conversation as well. So, HSPs naturally identify more closely with an advisory role. And Aron gives a really nice explanation of what that looks like in our modern world. So, let me just grab that quick quote for you. Okay. She says, speaking now of vocation, I don't mean that all HSPs become scholars, theologians, psychotherapists, consultants, or judges, although these are all classic royal advisor class careers. Whatever our career, we are likely to pursue it less like a warrior, more like a priest or royal counselor, thoughtfully in all senses. She's referencing here priests and clergy because vocations came originally as a calling to join a religious life, but today it's taken on various meanings, like we saw earlier, the meaning more about listening to a calling and purpose that translates into work. And we see in this passage that and it's found multiple times and times again in the research that professions that draw on the HSP's empathy, creativity, depth, and attention to detail are named. Caring and nurturing fields such as healthcare, childcare, and elder care, teaching and educational fields such as teachers and scholars, artistic fields, detailed oriented work such as law, architecture, science, and software development, to name a few. And what I think is very interesting to note here under two things are that for some of these fields that I just named, we might have an immediate, of course, reaction, such as the caring fields. And I'm noting as well that these are fields that have also become increasingly feminine over the past few years. Whereas there are other sectors that I have named where we might be a little bit more surprised to find in this list and imagining more of a warrior type energy taking place, such as in law or in teaching or perhaps even in art making. So I thought that those were interesting things to note. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I think it, yeah, I think it sort of forces us to almost like confront any
Mm,
preconceived notions we might have.
yeah, biases.
Yeah, exactly. About what kind of work for what kind of people, what genders of people, or even what traits. And I love what you said about it's not so much that there's specific careers that we would choose, but more that whatever we choose, we approach with our HSP energy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I like that. We just like our warrior colleagues can still be in the same places. We'll just do things a bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think exactly to that point, it is important to highlight that while HSPs might trend towards some professions over others, there are no professions that are advised or better for HSPs to choose or that are designated HSP careers. HSPs can do and perform at anything that they want, just like the rest of us. So I think that's very important and also highlighted by research. Yeah. So to come back to what you were saying earlier, Anna, I think it's also interesting to look at it from another angle that HSPs might also find their meaning and purpose in other areas than the one that provides them with a physical paycheck, such as taking care of their family or traveling or time in nature or other creative endeavors. And thus they may choose careers that might not fit within a typical nurturing, advisor-esque, caring profile or align with a passion per se, but instead choose jobs that give other benefits to fulfill their needs and their purpose elsewhere, such as flexibility, part-time, remote, practical, and that can give them more mental and physical space to find meaning elsewhere. So I thought that that was very interesting because I didn't find that very recurrent, and I think because we live in this society that's very much promotes that, we spend most of our time at work, then maybe we should be choosing careers that are our lives or that we want to be there all the time, and that for HSPs it would be very hard if we didn't, if it wasn't a vocation. But I think this point really shows that there are HSPs that would actually prefer to not be in those kinds of profession because, and like the rationale here is that because of our empathy and our emotional responsiveness, HSPs are more likely to carry with them the weight of work, and they might absorb other people's emotions, various atmospheres and energies, clients' challenges and stories, and the demand of the workload. And so, for these reasons, some HSPs are also at higher risk of burnouts, or HSPs in general are higher risk of burnout and feeling drained or impacted by negative work environment. So, people might choose careers with less interpersonal interaction, more independent work, a career where they can give their sensitivity and nervous system a break, actually. So I thought that that was a super interesting angle because it it feels like it goes a bit against the grain at first, and when you listen to the rationale, it makes complete sense as well.
So let's talk about you for a little bit and on these reflections that we've been making about vocations and career paths and how that relates to our sensitivity. Agath, can you speak to your career path? Did you always know the direction you wanted to go? And when you did make decisions, did your sensitivity, or what role did your sensitivity play?
Mm, yes, I think we started talking about that a little bit in the first episodes and maybe somewhere in the second episode as well. I started out wanting a career in the arts. I fell in love with the world of theater and cinema at a very young age, and I think partly because I felt seen when I would step into roles that no one would have expected to see come out of this little girl who was quiet, who was very sensitive. And when I was on stage or when I was acting, because that was mostly what I would do, I was no longer this sensitive, quiet, invisible little girl. I felt my potential. I felt my power. And that was something that I rarely saw reflected in other people's eyes in my everyday life. And as I grew older and I experienced the challenges of being highly sensitive with my high emotional reactivity, I was bullied in school, and I went through other very difficult experiences in my formative years so as a young adult. And I found mental health. It kind of fell on my laps. I found mental health. I really needed to navigate it for myself. And so I just entered that field and thought it was a very interesting field. I felt called. And I think even when I was in the arts still, I just felt like I needed to do something with my life where I was in service of others. And I still couldn't find that completely in the arts as I, the way that I was engaged in them. And as I started studying psychology and navigating my own mental health journey, I was still feeling attached to my career in the arts, and it was my dream. And then that dream turned out to make me feel like if I continued in that field, in cinema and theater, my sensitivity was no longer a strength, but a weakness. I felt like I was not competitive enough to make it. I felt like I was going to get walked all over, that I was going to take everything very personally. I just felt like I didn't have the personality to make it. I felt like I needed to have a much harder shell, and I just felt like it was not the place where I wanted to evolve. And it was very hard to let go, but because I found this new love in psychology, I it was the transition was easier. And then I found the creative arts, which was a beautiful marriage, and that's how I describe it all the time, this beautiful marriage between psychology, mental health, and the arts. And that's a place where I feel my sensitivity is not just welcome but needed, and gives a very different flavor to the work. I wouldn't want a therapist that is not sensitive. And so I think that that is a big part of what I bring to this space. And my sensitivity plays a huge role now in my life. And I think at first I felt like it was very combative, and now I'm very welcoming. So my what I felt was a weakness now became my strength. So I would say that's the gist of my evolution career wise.
It sounds like you became the kind of person that you needed and the kind of person that maybe supported you.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And I'm wondering, because we just said that there's no careers that we can't do. Um, I know this happened at a time where you were making these big decisions in your life. And I'm also wondering, with your, like, the wisdom that you have now, what you might say to young Agath that was like, this field, I can't do this field because I'm sensitive and I don't have the character,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because even in the field of mental health, sometimes I feel like the reasons why I came in that field and the reality of how the field works or operates are still not fully aligned. I will also come back to the um, concept of authenticity. And I think that you are never living a wrong life if you're living authentically. And so it might feel like nothing is working out for you if you're not doing what everybody else is doing, especially in certain fields where it's harsh. The judgment is hard. It's very critical. It's performance based. There's a lot of comparison, but we need to believe that what we're bringing in is unique, and there's no two people like us. And so if all we work hard at is being like everybody else, then we don't have anything special to offer. Whereas if you work really hard at being exactly who you are and what you're bringing and what your vision is, then nobody else is going to be like you. And that is what you have special to bring. And I do think that boundaries are important, that working at building a strong network in terms of like your support system and people around you who will believe in you no matter what happens in places where you don't control where these people are coming from and what their references are and what their ideas of what success is and what success is not. And the best that you can do is show up authentically and with passion and care. And then eventually something will work out. But I do think these are difficult conversations to have with ourselves. And I still think that everything worked out the way that they were supposed to. And also, I know that if I were to go back to doing more in the art space, I know I would show up exactly that way now. I wouldn't try to be um, fitting in or try to be what people expect me to be because I look the way that I look or because I enter a very specific box in casting and things like that. I would be like, no, this is not what I want to offer. So if it doesn't work for me, then that's not what I want. But yeah, it's a very layered conversation, and not everyone has that opinion, and that's okay. But that's mine.
Yeah, I love your answer really because it and I'm also so grateful that you have the career path that you have because it led you here with
Thank you.
me today.
Yeah.
Um and also you're like I know from working with you how wonderful you are and talented and how much of an impact you do have. And I think, you know, to hear you say it in this way about how much where you landed now is where you need to be, and also that the way that you think about the field of the arts has evolved in a way that today it's something that you can, it doesn't mean you will, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something that you can pursue because you see it as being somewhere where you can go and you can go authentically
Mm-hmm.
if you want to.
Thank you.
It's not closed to you. And that's
Thank
really
you.
beautiful.
Thank you for all the kind words.
Mm.
You're so lovely. Yeah, I'm really glad with how things worked out and how sensitivity now is like we're doing a whole podcast about it and talking about how it's this power, this like quiet power. And and now I'm also wondering, Anna, if your sensitivity plays a part in your daily professional life, as you've now explained to us as well that you're also in the caring healthcare field, and we've talked about it a little bit in other episodes as well. And so in your daily profession, how do you feel like your sensitivity acts, and does it support your work? Does it ever hinder it or make it more challenging?
One of the things that's really important when I think about my career path is how much I didn't have the vocabulary or the knowledge really about my sensitivity. So I don't think it played a role in a conscious way in my career path. And when I think about it now, I think that what happened is there were a lot of things that I thought I couldn't do. Yeah, I'm sad for me. Like, but there's a lot of things I was like, oh, I don't think I can do something that's like in big groups. I just, I would feel more comfortable one on one. And that kind of narrowed my selection. And a series of sometimes no's, sometimes yeses, if that makes sense. So a series of things that I was like, okay, I eliminated some things for certain reasons and then said yes to certain things that I was excited about at the same time. And when I look back, I think that my sensitivity or my personality, what I liked, really did play in. And a lot of those are aligned with the conversations that we've had. So, this idea of finding meaning, there was a lot of options that I won't name, but there's a lot of options that
Mm.
I sort of thought to myself, well, what's the point of that? Like,
Mm.
I don't want to do that. Um, and I knew that I wanted to do something where I was going to be able to feel like I was making a positive difference. And I
Mhm.
remember that being really one of the most important things to me. At first, I wanted to be a therapist, and I did a whole bachelor's degree in psychology for that reason until I landed in dietetics. And then even within this field, there's so much that we can do with it. And where I landed was in counseling, and where I
Mm.
landed was one-on-one counseling, and where I landed was in the mental health area of nutrition counseling, specifically with working with people and exploring their relationship with food and
Mm.
body image and intuitive eating and disordered eating, and these themes. And it's very interesting because I could have also gone to sports nutrition and
Mhm.
calculating and numbers and all those kind of things. So even within my field, there were just a series of choices over time that in the end play so well with with my values and also with what works for my needs and my sensitivity.
Mhm.
That's a long-winded answer, I think, but
No, I mean
that's the
everything we
answer.
say is long-winded in that case. But do you feel like in those everyday one-on-one interaction, how does your sensitivity come out for you? Does it help you do that work? Do you ever find it challenging in those moments, in certain appointments, to be highly sensitive?
I think it helps more than it hurts,
Mhm.
the way I see it. And I think in particular, because I work in a field where I'm talking about relationship with food, about body image, and these are such personal and sensitive
Mhm.
topics, I think it very much helps to be able to pick up on subtleties, to be able
Mm.
to read people very well, to be able to sense the moment that someone is feeling uncomfortable, and also to be able to sense when they're feeling safe or they're feeling like they want to open up, to have a sensitivity to how people react to the language that you're using, to
Mm.
be able to notice and check in fast when, I don't know how to say, like when the vibe changes,
Yeah,
when the
yeah,
mood
yeah.
shifts just a little bit, to be able to say, "Oh, I see you, like something changed in your face when I said that," or "What
Love
does
it.
that mean?" Or right? Like so in one-on-one settings when we're talking about such important and personal and sometimes vulnerable topics, that degree of being able to sense, the pick up on the nuances, interpret, remember. That's another thing too, is that do I remember previous appointments even when they've been months away.
Mm.
Sometimes someone is going to say something and I haven't necessarily read my notes from 3 months ago,
That's
but I'm
interesting.
going to say, "Oh, I remember you said that and that makes a lot of sense and this is a pattern, and do, do you agree? What do you think?" So that aspect, it's hard to describe exactly what it feels like in the moment, but I see that as such a strength
Mm.
to be able to listen and remember important themes, to then bring them back and be able to have those conversations and move forward. So
Mhm.
I see it really as a strength in those contexts.
Yeah. Yeah, you're moving like a therapist. I love
Mm.
it. That energy. I love it. And
Oh, thank
you
you.
know, picking up on the subtleties is what makes this work so incredibly complex, because it's not a hard science, right? That no two people are going to be the same. Psychology, like, you can learn concepts, you can learn theories, you can learn approaches. And I'm sure it's the same thing in nutrition, and you have a counseling approach. So similarly, you learn some techniques around counseling. And but then when you're in that room with somebody, a lot of that is about that relationship. It's about that human contact, and it's about how not two people with this the, like, in quotes, same presenting concern will actually show up the same. And so to be able to pick up on these differences, to pick up on the subtlety, to pick up on the shift in the body language when someone is talking about something that, oh, it seems like that's an area where we need to go a little bit deeper here. And they might not even know that themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this work is so incredibly complex and important. And I think it lacks the recognition that it deserves. I'm just going to put that out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we're talking about the emotions and the sensitivity in that one-on-one room. But I'm wondering if, in a larger sense, it's also become a hotter topic now in our society about emotions at work. Big topic now. Mental health at work, emotions at work.
Mm-hmm.
Being HSPs, people might think that because of our emotional reactivity, we might be more prone to taking things personally, not being receptive to feedback or criticism, needing more time to complete projects, whatever it is. And so that our ability to manage our emotions in the workplace might be challenged. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to that from your experience, or if you've had an evolution there, if knowing about your high sensitivity has changed anything for you there, or if it's never been an issue for you really for different reasons.
Definitely, there's been an evolution. And, the first time I even thought about how sensitivity impacts my work or my ability to thrive at work was actually a conversation in therapy. And she was so practical about it. I was surprised at the time. And she was literally saying it was a time in COVID, we were about to go back to the office. And she started asking me, okay, but do you have a closed office, or is it going to be a cubicle? Because HSP is not so great with cubicles. Like you need to have your own space. Are you going to have light? She started asking me all these questions. And I was like, how do you know that that's important to me? Are you reading my mind? Like, because it's true. But she asked it in such like practical ways that was so validating. And then because she had like spoken it to life, I started really focusing on those things. And it allows me, even today, that's funny, in a work context, to be able to say, I'm actually in an office at work, and we're moving actually next week. And I remember when we were moving and there was an opportunity, I didn't necessarily choose my office space, but there was an opportunity to make requests and things like that. And I was like, I need a window, and if possible, can it be soundproof? And so I asked, it doesn't hurt to ask. So you express yourself, but I know what to ask for now. And same thing in terms of workload. And that part's just the skill, right? So the skill of being able to know exactly how much I can do and do really well, and where that threshold is. And so that translates, for example, to I know that I can see this many clients. And I know that I can see this many new clients, because that's a different sort of intensity. And this many follow-ups in one day. And so I have a certain threshold, and I know where I can go and really feel like I'm giving my 100% in those moments. And where if I start to kind of squeeze things in and fit more people in and say yes because the wait list is long and this kind of thing, that's where I feel like I'm not showing up as well. And it's just to be able to know those things and then communicate that. And I've gotten much better with time.
Yeah. And I love to highlight every time this concept of evolution, because sometimes people might feel like if they're stuck now, they're stuck forever, right? Or like if they are however old they are today, then it's too late for them. And I think that people can change and things can get better when you get to know yourself better, and when you do that work, and when you have spaces where people allow you and give you permission to be in self-discovery as well. So I really appreciate that too, that you found over time what works for you, and that is a continuing evolution. Yeah.
Love that. And lastly, what I'll say is that I'm going to tie back to the meaning that you were talking about. And I feel like when it comes to emotions, I think the word is like when you're in a state of flow, there's a feeling like I'm good at this, I'm having an impact. It's very rewarding time spent.
Yeah, that's really important.
That's all for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of this conversation on sensitivity and careers, professional life, and entrepreneurship, where we'll focus our conversation on leadership and HSPs as business pioneers.